There's a story out there, and it's gigantic. It might be the biggest story out there right now, and nobody's talking about it. And joining me now is my buddy Greg Price. We're going to talk about it. He's the communications director for the State Freedom Caucus Network. Greg, now I woke up today under the impression that the biggest story in America was that my book is coming out tomorrow, but now I find out there's something bigger than that. How can that be?
Yeah, Jesse, private property rights are under attack in South Dakota, and it's probably the worst attack on private property rights we've seen in a very long time. What's happening is a company called Summit Carbon Solutions is trying to build a 2,000-mile carbon capture pipeline that will travel from ethanol plants in Iowa, carry liquid carbon underground, and sequester it under the ground in North Dakota. And the reason they want to build this is because it will lower the carbon footprints of these ethanol plants in Iowa. And so this is happening. And in order to build this, Summit Carbon Solutions has filed over 80 eminent domain lawsuits against landowners in South Dakota. You know, small town farmers, people whose land has been in their families for generations are now facing the loss of it in order to build this pipeline. And, you know, I wrote a story on my Substack about it, and I highlighted the story of Jared Bosley. And, you know, the video on the screen are surveyors from Summit Carbon Solutions that entered his property, his house and his workshop and his farm without their permission. And this is happening to landowners everywhere. These people are just coming onto their property and they don't even have a permit to build the pipeline yet. And, you know, you recall a couple years ago, probably the story of the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Standing Rock Sioux protest against it. That pipeline didn't even travel on tribal lands. They weren't using eminent domain to build it. And it actually carried oil and gas, which provides economic value to a state, as opposed to just a way for ethanol plants to improve their ESG scores. That's happening, and it's happening all over South Dakota. Not only is nobody doing anything about it, but the elected Republicans in South Dakota are doing nothing about it. And the reason is because this company has major ties to lots of well-connected people in the GOP. Former Iowa Governor Terry Branstad, who is the longest serving governor in American history, is their senior advisor. The guy who runs their communications is the former chairman of the South Dakota Republican Party, and they were a platinum sponsor of Governor Kristi Noem's inauguration back in January. And back in the legislative session, there were multiple bills to protect the rights of landowners, and they all failed. And these people have essentially just been abandoned by their leaders for this carbon capture ethanol scam. And no national media is talking about it until I started doing it.
Okay, this is unbelievable. So tell me where we're at in the process, Greg. You said all these lawsuits have been filed to try to take this land from these farmers, but are they succeeding? I know the surveyors are already going on their land, but are people already losing their private property?
No, all of the lawsuits were filed like recently, like at the end of April, beginning of May. So they're still being adjudicated. But so in my story, though, I highlighted how Jared Bosley, he had these surveyors come onto his farm, and he wasn't even home. He was out planting alfalfas, and his wife was. And he had a 6-second conversation with these guys on a speakerphone that his wife was holding and told them they shouldn't be there without their sheriff. And these guys took him to court and accused him of threatening to shoot them, which was a complete and total lie. And they tried to get a contempt of court charge. And that would have prevented him from being back on his property when they come back. And thankfully, Jared Bosley won that case. But all of these courts in South Dakota are ruling in favor of Summit Carbon Solutions. They're saying these surveyors, even though, again, they don't have the permit to build the pipeline yet, all of these surveyors have to be allowed to go onto the property and do their work. And it's shameful. It's terrible what's happening to these people. Because again, like, it has no economic value. This is land that has been in their families for a very, very long time. And basically you have people just showing up. And here's the other thing. Some of them are showing up with armed security guards. I talked to 2 other landowners in South Dakota who said that this happened to them, that these people literally showed up with guys with pistols strapped to their waists, like something right out of Yellowstone or Blazing Saddles. It's crazy what's happening to these people.
Okay, and these things are being handled in state courts in South Dakota. Sounds like, I mean, I would have had more faith in South Dakota. Sounds like the state of South Dakota sold these guys out.
Yeah, so the big problem, the reason they're really allowed to do this is because South Dakota doesn't really have protections for landowners on the books. And, they tried to change. And so right now, their Public Utilities Commission essentially regulates all of this, and they designate pipelines as common carriers. And so that's why they're able to take advantage of the lax eminent domain laws in South Dakota in order to sue these people. Now, in the last legislative session, the legislature, led by the South Dakota Freedom Caucus, tried to pass a law that would have revoked their status as a common carrier. And so that would have basically not allowed them to use eminent domain against these people, but they got crushed. It got shut down, and all of the Republicans voted for what the Summit Carbon lobbyists wanted. And obviously Kristi Noem hasn't said anything, hasn't done anything. And, it's also happening in North Dakota, which is why it's kind of crazy. You have Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, nobody's ever heard of until 5 seconds ago, running for president instead of doing something to protect these landowners. And, the reason they're not saying anything about it is because, as I said, influential people in the GOP work for this company and are connected to it. Terry Barnstead, the former governor, is a kingpin in Iowa. If you want political success in Iowa, you need his support. And that explains why people who fancy themselves current or future presidential candidates aren't doing anything about it.
Golly. Greg, keep up the great work, my man. Come back soon.
Thanks, Jesse. Always great to be with you.
I don't know if the GOP, I don't know what's worse, their cowardice or their corruption. You heard what he said. They bought him off. All that sweet lobbying money, paying off Kristi Noem, platinum sponsors, everything else. This is why people get so frustrated, and this is why people on the right end up sitting out elections. They get disheartened because they get sold down the river by their politicians time and time again. Freaking disgraceful, man.
For too long, we've been led to believe that communism is a thing of the past. But the truth is, communism is alive. It's here, and it's infiltrating every aspect of American life. Introducing the Anti-Communist Manifesto by Jesse Kelly, the practical guide for patriots ready to defend our nation from its most dangerous enemy. Discover the shocking extent of communist infiltration in our education system, their alliance with American corporations, and the twisted truth behind environmentalism. This eye-opening book exposes the true face of communism and empowers you to fight back. Join the fight for freedom. The Anti-Communist Manifesto, a new must-read book from Jesse Kelly. Get your copy today at jessekellybook.com or wherever books are sold.